The morning fog hung thick over Windsor Castle as Camilla Parker Bowles hurried through the corridors, her silk scarf trailing behind her. She clutched a small velvet pouch tightly in her trembling hands, glancing nervously over her shoulder every few steps. The ancient stone seemed to whisper secrets as her heels clicked against the polished floors, echoing through the empty hallways. 3 palace guards stood at attention near the main entrance, their red uniforms crisp and intimidating. Camilla forced herself to walk normally, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. The weight of what she carried felt heavier with each passing moment, and beads of perspiration formed on her forehead despite the cool morning air. She had discovered the hidden compartment purely by accident the previous evening while searching for her reading glasses in the Queen's former private study. The oak panel had shifted slightly when she leaned against it, revealing a secret space behind the ornate bookshelf. What she found inside had left her speechless and terrified. The velvet pouch contained 3 magnificent pieces that had supposedly been lost decades ago during a royal tour of Australia. The famous Cullinan 7 heart-shaped pendant worth millions sparkled even in the dim light of her chambers. Beside it lay the Queen Mother's sapphire brooch and a diamond tiara that had belonged to Queen Victoria herself. These weren't mere replicas or forgotten duplicates. They were the actual missing crown jewels that had caused an international scandal when they disappeared. Camilla's mind raced as she tried to understand how these priceless artifacts had ended up hidden in the Queen's private study. Had the late Queen known about their location all along? Was this some elaborate cover-up that had been maintained for years? The implications were staggering, and she felt the crushing weight of royal secrets pressing down upon her shoulders. As she reached her private quarters, Camilla locked the door behind her and drew the heavy curtains closed. The velvet pouch seemed to burn in her hands as she placed it carefully in her personal safe, hidden behind a portrait of King Charles during his younger years. She needed time to think, to decide what to do with this earth-shattering discovery. The telephone rang suddenly, making her jump. It was Charles, calling from his morning meetings with government officials. His voice sounded strained and distant as he mentioned that palace security had been increased due to some unspecified concerns. Camilla's blood ran cold as she wondered if someone already suspected what she had found. That afternoon brought an unexpected visit from Lady Margaret Thornfield, the palace's chief administrator and one of the most feared women in royal circles. She appeared at Camilla's door with a polite smile that didn't reach her cold blue eyes, accompanied by 2 security personnel who remained stationed outside. Lady Margaret's conversation seemed innocent enough on the surface, discussions about upcoming charity events and royal engagements. But Camilla noticed how the woman's gaze swept the room methodically, taking note of every detail. When Lady Margaret casually mentioned that the palace would be conducting routine security inspections of all royal quarters, Camilla felt her mouth go dry. The older woman's fingers drummed against her leather portfolio as she spoke about the importance of maintaining royal security and preserving precious royal heritage. Her words carried an underlying threat that made Camilla's skin crawl. It was clear that this visit was no coincidence and that somehow, someone suspected she had stumbled upon something significant. As evening approached, Camilla found herself trapped in a web of royal intrigue that she had never imagined existed. The discovery of the missing crown jewels had opened a door to secrets that powerful people had worked hard to keep buried. She realized that her life as she knew it was about to change forever, and that the glittering treasures in her safe might very well become the instruments of her downfall. The wind howled outside her windows as darkness fell, and Camilla wondered if she would be able to protect herself from the forces that were already beginning to close in around her. The missing jewels had found their way back into the light, but at what cost to the woman who had discovered them? Dawn broke with an ominous gray sky as Camilla awoke to the sound of heavy footsteps in the corridor outside her chambers. She had barely slept, her dreams filled with visions of glittering jewels and shadowy figures pursuing her through endless palace hallways. The velvet pouch in her safe seemed to call to her, reminding her of the dangerous secret she now carried. A sharp knock at her door made her heart leap into her throat. Palace Security Chief Commander Harrison stood outside with 4 uniformed guards, his expression stern and uncompromising. He held an official document bearing the royal seal, and his voice was coldly professional as he announced that all royal quarters would be searched immediately for security purposes. Camilla's Training in royal protocol served her well as she maintained her composure, graciously allowing the search team to enter her private rooms. But inside, panic consumed her thoughts as she watched the guards methodically examine every corner of her living space. Commander Harrison's sharp eyes missed nothing as he supervised the operation, occasionally making notes on his official clipboard. The guards moved with practiced efficiency, checking behind paintings, inside drawers, and beneath furniture. Camilla tried to appear calm as she sat in her favorite armchair, but her hands trembled slightly as she picked up her morning tea. The safe behind Charles's portrait remained undetected for now, but she knew it was only a matter of time before their search became more thorough. Lady Margaret Thornfield arrived midway through the search, her presence adding another layer of tension to the already charged atmosphere. She observed Camilla carefully, studying every micro-expression and gesture for signs of guilt or nervousness. The two women exchanged polite pleasantries, but their conversation felt like a carefully choreographed dance of suspicion and denial. Commander Harrison approached Camilla with a clipboard full of official forms, explaining that all personal belongings needed to be documented for security purposes. His questions seemed routine at first, but gradually became more pointed and specific. Did she have any valuable items that hadn't been previously registered? Had she discovered anything unusual during her time at the palace? Were there any objects in her possession that might belong to the crown estate? Camilla answered each question with careful precision, her years of experience dealing with royal protocol helping her navigate the dangerous interrogation. She maintained that she possessed only personal items of sentimental value, nothing that would interest the crown's security apparatus. But she could see doubt flickering in Commander Harrison's eyes, and she knew her performance wasn't entirely convincing. The search team's attention turned to the ornate paintings adorning her walls, and Camilla's breath caught in her throat as one of the guards examined the portrait of young Charles. His fingers traced the frame carefully, checking for any irregularities or hidden mechanisms. Time seemed to slow as he paused, his hand hovering near the corner where the safe's hidden switch was located. Lady Margaret stepped closer to observe the guard's work, her keen intelligence focused on every detail of the investigation. She commented casually about the beauty of the portrait, but Camilla detected an undertone of suspicion in her words. The older woman's reputation for uncovering palace secrets was legendary, and Camilla realized she was facing a formidable opponent. A sudden commotion in the hallway provided a momentary distraction as another member of the royal household was escorted past Camilla's door by security personnel. The interruption allowed Camilla to compose herself slightly, but she remained acutely aware that her secret was hanging by the thinnest of threads. Commander Harrison concluded the initial search without discovering the hidden safe, but he made it clear that more detailed investigations would follow. He informed Camilla that all royal quarters would remain under heightened surveillance until further notice, and that any suspicious activities would be reported immediately to the highest levels of palace authority. As the search team prepared to leave, Lady Margaret lingered behind for a private moment with Camilla. Her parting words were carefully chosen but unmistakably threatening. She mentioned how unfortunate it would be if anyone were found to be hiding important items from the crown, and how such discoveries could have devastating consequences for all involved. Alone once again, Camilla realized that her window of opportunity was rapidly closing. The missing crown jewels in her safe represented not just priceless royal heritage, but potentially explosive evidence of decades-old conspiracies and cover-ups. She had to make a decision quickly about what to do with her dangerous discovery before the palace's security apparatus tightened its grip around her completely, and the morning's events had made one thing crystal clear. Powerful forces within the palace hierarchy knew something was amiss, and they would stop at nothing to uncover the truth. Camilla found herself at the center of a royal mystery that could destroy everything she had worked to build, but she also held the key to secrets that could shake the very foundations of the monarchy itself. The tension in the palace had become suffocating as news of the security sweep spread throughout the royal household. Camilla noticed how conversations stopped abruptly when she entered rooms, and how staff members avoided making direct eye contact with her. The atmosphere of suspicion was thick enough to cut with a knife, and she could feel invisible eyes watching her every movement. Charles returned from his official duties that evening looking haggard and concerned. He pulled Camilla aside in their private sitting room, his voice barely above a whisper as he explained the gravity of the situation. Intelligence sources had informed him that certain valuable royal artifacts might have been misplaced or stolen, and the palace was under enormous pressure to recover them quickly and quietly. Camilla's heart pounded as she listened to her husband describe the very jewels that were hidden in her safe just meters away. Charles spoke about the Cullinan 7 pendant, the Queen Mother's sapphire brooch, and Queen Victoria's diamond tiara with the reverence of someone discussing sacred relics. He had no idea that his wife possessed the answers to the mystery that was causing such turmoil throughout the royal establishment. The weight of her deception grew heavier with each passing hour. Camilla found herself trapped between her loyalty to Charles and her fear of the consequences that would follow if she revealed the truth. How could she explain that she had discovered the missing treasures and hidden them without immediately reporting the find? Her actions could be interpreted as theft or conspiracy, charges that would destroy not only her reputation but potentially bring down the entire royal family. Commander Harrison appeared at their door the following morning with additional security personnel and sophisticated detection equipment. He announced that Phase 2 of the security investigation would involve more advanced scanning techniques, including the use of specialized devices capable of detecting metal objects hidden within walls and furniture. Camilla felt the blood drain from her face as she realized her safe would be discovered within hours. The scanning process began methodically, with technicians moving their equipment systematically through each room. Camilla excused herself to attend to royal correspondence, but her hands shook so violently that she could barely hold her pen. The sound of the scanning devices grew closer to her private study, where Charles's portrait concealed her devastating secret. Lady Margaret Thornfield observed the scanning process with the intensity of a hawk watching its prey. Her sharp eyes never left Camilla's face, searching for any sign of guilt or nervous behavior. When the scanning equipment detected the metal safe behind the portrait, Lady Margaret's satisfaction was visible in the slight curve of her lips. Commander Harrison called for immediate access to the concealed safe, and Camilla knew her moment of reckoning had arrived. With trembling fingers, she provided the combination, knowing that within seconds her carefully guarded secret would be exposed to the very people she had been trying to avoid. The safe door swung open with a soft click that seemed to echo through the room like thunder. The velvet pouch sat inside the safe like an accusation, its rich purple color stark against the metal interior. Commander Harrison reached for it with gloved hands, his expression grave as he felt the unmistakable weight and shape of precious jewels within the fabric. Lady Margaret stepped closer, her breathing shallow with anticipation as the moment of truth approached. When the contents of the pouch were revealed, the room fell silent except for the soft gasps of recognition from the security team. The missing crown jewels lay before them in all their magnificent glory, their faceted surfaces catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. The Cullinan 7 pendant seemed to pulse with its own inner fire, while the sapphire brooch glowed with deep blue intensity. Commander Harrison's voice was steel as he formally placed Camilla under palace detention pending a full investigation into how the missing royal treasures had come to be in her possession. Lady Margaret read from an official document that outlined the serious charges being considered, including theft of crown property, conspiracy to defraud the royal estate, and violation of the Official Secrets Act. Camilla's protests about finding the jewels by accident fell on deaf ears as security personnel escorted her to a secure wing of the palace that she had never seen before. The corridors were stark and unwelcoming, lined with heavy doors that spoke of isolation and interrogation. Her comfortable royal quarters seemed like a distant memory as she was locked into a sparsely furnished room with barred windows. Charles arrived within hours, his face a mask of confusion and betrayal as he demanded answers from his wife. The man she loved looked at her as if she were a stranger, struggling to reconcile the woman he had married with the person who had apparently stolen priceless royal artifacts. His voice cracked with emotion as he asked how she could have hidden such a monumental secret from him. The discovery of the missing crown jewels had transformed Camilla from a respected member of the royal family into a suspected criminal overnight. But she knew that the real truth behind the jewels' disappearance and rediscovery was far more complex and dangerous than anyone yet realized. The investigation that was about to begin would uncover secrets that had been buried for decades, and Camilla found herself at the center of a royal scandal that could topple the monarchy itself. As night fell over the palace, Camilla sat alone in her detention cell, knowing that her life had changed irrevocably. The crown jewels that had seemed like such a miraculous discovery just days before had become the instruments of her destruction, and she wondered if the truth would ever be enough to set her free. The interrogation room deep within the palace's security wing was deliberately intimidating, with harsh fluorescent lighting and walls painted in institutional gray. Camilla sat across from a panel of investigators that included Commander Harrison, Lady Margaret Thornfield, and Sir Geoffrey Blackwood, the palace's chief legal counsel. The atmosphere was charged with suspicion and barely contained hostility as they prepared to extract the truth from her. Commander Harrison began the formal questioning with methodical precision, his voice devoid of any warmth or sympathy. He demanded a detailed account of how Camilla had discovered the missing crown jewels, when she had first accessed the hidden compartment, and why she had chosen to conceal her find rather than report it immediately to proper authorities. Each question felt like a trap designed to catch her in contradictions or lies. Camilla recounted her story carefully, explaining how she had found the secret panel while searching for her reading glasses in the Queen's former study. She described her shock at discovering the velvet pouch and her growing horror as she realized the magnitude of what she had found. Her voice trembled as she admitted to hiding the jewels out of fear and confusion, unsure of whom to trust with such an explosive discovery. Lady Margaret's interrogation technique was far more subtle, but equally dangerous. She asked seemingly innocent questions about Camilla's daily routines, her access to various parts of the palace, and her knowledge of royal protocols regarding valuable artifacts, but beneath the polite surface lay accusations of calculated theft and deliberate deception that could result in criminal charges and permanent exile from the royal family. Sir Geoffrey focused on the legal implications of Camilla's actions, explaining in clinical detail how her failure to report the discovery could be construed as theft under British law. He outlined the potential penalties she faced, including imprisonment, financial ruin, and the complete destruction of her reputation. His words were chosen carefully to maximize their psychological impact and break down her resistance to their investigation. The questioning continued for hours without breaks, a deliberate strategy designed to exhaust Camilla and make her more likely to reveal additional information or contradict her earlier statements. The investigators rotated their approaches between aggressive confrontation and false sympathy, trying to find weaknesses in her psychological defenses that they could exploit. During a brief recess, Camilla overheard fragments of conversation between her interrogators that chilled her to the bone. They spoke about the need to control the narrative and prevent any damaging revelations from reaching the public. Lady Margaret mentioned something about cleaning up loose ends and ensuring that certain historical secrets remained buried forever. When the questioning resumed, the investigators' focus shifted to Camilla's knowledge of the jewel's original disappearance decades earlier. They seemed particularly interested in any conversations she might have had with the late Queen about missing royal artifacts or historical cover-ups. Their intense scrutiny suggested that they suspected her discovery was not as accidental as she claimed. Commander Harrison produced a thick file containing photographs and documents related to the original investigation into the missing crown jewels. He spread the materials across the table, pointing out inconsistencies in the official reports and suggesting that Camilla might have had access to information that led her directly to the hidden compartment. His implication was clear. She was part of a larger conspiracy. The interrogation took a darker turn when Sir Geoffrey began questioning Camilla about her financial situation and any recent unusual transactions or communications with external parties. They suspected she might be working with art dealers, international criminals, or foreign agents interested in acquiring stolen royal treasures. The accusations grew more outlandish and desperate as the investigators failed to break her story. Lady Margaret produced a surprising piece of evidence, security footage showing Camilla entering and leaving the Queen's former study on the night she claimed to have made her discovery. The timestamp data seemed to support her account, but Lady Margaret suggested the footage could have been manipulated or that Camilla had made multiple visits to the room over several days or weeks. As evening approached, the investigators seemed to realize that their aggressive tactics were not producing the confession or additional evidence they had hoped to obtain. Camilla's story remained consistent despite hours of intense questioning, and they had found no concrete proof that she was involved in the original theft or part of any ongoing conspiracy to steal royal property. Commander Harrison announced that Camilla would remain in detention while they conducted additional investigations into the circumstances surrounding her discovery. They would be examining forensic evidence from the hidden compartment, reviewing decades of security records, and interviewing other palace staff who might have knowledge of the missing jewels or access to the Queen's private study. But Camilla sensed that something deeper was driving their investigation beyond simple concern about stolen royal property. The investigators seemed genuinely frightened by her discovery, as if the missing crown jewels represented a threat to carefully maintained secrets that went far beyond their monetary value. She began to suspect that she had stumbled into a web of royal intrigue and historical cover-ups that powerful people would do anything to protect. As they escorted her back to her detention cell, Camilla realized that her fight for freedom was just beginning. The missing crown jewels had opened a door to mysteries that stretched back decades, and she was now trapped at the center of a dangerous game where the stakes were much higher than anyone had initially realized. Her discovery had set in motion events that could expose long-buried secrets and threaten the very foundations of the monarchy itself. The detention cell became Camilla's world as days blended into nights without any word from the outside. The only human contact came from silent guards who delivered meals and escorted her to brief exercise periods in a small courtyard surrounded by high walls. The isolation was a deliberate psychological tactic designed to break her spirit and make her more compliant during future interrogations. Charles was finally permitted to visit after a week of complete separation, but their reunion was far from the loving embrace Camilla had hoped for. He sat across from her in the sterile visiting room, his face drawn with exhaustion and stress. Palace officials had convinced him that his wife might be involved in a complex conspiracy that threatened the stability of the monarchy itself. Their conversation was monitored by security personnel, limiting what they could discuss openly. Charles spoke in carefully measured tones about the ongoing investigation and the pressure he was under from government officials and senior royal advisors. He had been advised to distance himself from Camilla publicly until her innocence could be definitively established, a betrayal that cut deeper than any physical punishment. Behind Charles's formal words, Camilla could see the pain and confusion in his eyes. The man she loved was torn between his loyalty to her and his duty to the crown, forced to choose between his wife and his position as future king. The investigators had skillfully poisoned their relationship by planting seeds of doubt about her motives and truthfulness. Dr. Eleanor Hartwell, a forensic expert specializing in historical artifacts, arrived at the palace to examine the recovered crown jewels in the hidden compartment where they had been found. Her reputation for uncovering the truth behind art forgeries and stolen treasures made her both an asset and a potential threat to those seeking to control the investigation's outcome. Dr. Hartwell's preliminary findings challenged many assumptions about the case. Her analysis of dust patterns and environmental factors suggested that the jewels had been hidden in the compartment for many years, possibly decades. This evidence supported Camilla's claim that she had genuinely stumbled upon a long-forgotten hiding place rather than recently concealing stolen property. The forensic experts' work revealed other disturbing details that the investigators tried to suppress. Tool marks on the hidden compartment's mechanism indicated it had been accessed multiple times over the years, suggesting that someone had been monitoring or maintaining the concealed jewels. The implications were staggering. The missing crown jewels had never truly been lost, but had been deliberately hidden by someone with intimate knowledge of palace secrets. Lady Margaret attempted to influence Dr. Hartwell's investigation by providing selective information about the original theft and limiting her access to certain historical records. But the forensic expert's integrity and professional standards made her resistant to manipulation. She insisted on conducting a thorough investigation regardless of the political pressures surrounding the case. Commander Harrison grew increasingly agitated as Dr. Hartwell's findings contradicted the official narrative his team had been promoting. Her scientific evidence suggested that the crown jewels' disappearance had been an inside job, orchestrated by someone with high-level access to royal property and intimate knowledge of the palace's hidden spaces. This revelation threatened to expose Corruption within the royal household's most trusted circles. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Dr. Hartwell discovered additional hidden compartments throughout the Queen's former private study. These secret spaces contained documents and photographs that painted a disturbing picture of historical cover-ups and manipulation of official records. The evidence suggested that powerful individuals had been using stolen royal artifacts for decades to maintain their influence and silence potential whistleblowers. Among the discovered documents was a series of handwritten letters from the late Queen expressing her growing concern about missing royal property and her suspicions about certain palace officials. The letters revealed that she had been conducting her own secret investigation into the thefts, but had been unable to identify the perpetrators before her death. Her words from beyond the grave now provided crucial evidence of Camilla's innocence. The most shocking discovery was a detailed confession written by Lord Pemberton, a former palace administrator who had died 5 years earlier. His letter described how he and several accomplices had orchestrated the theft of multiple royal artifacts over several decades, using their positions of trust to access secure areas and falsify official records. The missing crown jewels had been just one part of a much larger criminal enterprise. Lord Pemberton's confession explained how the stolen artifacts had been hidden throughout the palace in secret compartments that only the conspirators knew about. They had planned to eventually retrieve and sell the items after enough time had passed for the investigations to be forgotten. The late Queen's growing suspicions had forced them to abandon their plans and leave the jewels hidden indefinitely. Dr. Hartwell's evidence completely exonerated Camilla and exposed the real criminals behind the historical thefts. But her discoveries also revealed the existence of a sophisticated criminal network that had operated within the royal household for decades. The implications were so devastating that senior palace officials struggled to find ways to manage the crisis without causing irreparable damage to the monarchy's reputation. Commander Harrison and Lady Margaret found themselves in an impossible position as the evidence mounted against their preferred narrative. They had invested significant political capital in portraying Camilla as a criminal, and her vindication would expose their rush to judgment and potentially implicate them in the cover-up of the real crimes. As the truth began to emerge, Camilla realized that her ordeal was far from over. The powerful forces that had originally covered up the thefts would not easily accept exposure of their crimes. She had become a threat to individuals who had spent decades protecting their secrets, and they would not hesitate to eliminate anyone who stood in their way. The missing crown jewels had revealed a web of corruption and betrayal that reached into the highest levels of the royal establishment. Camilla's accidental discovery had set in motion a chain of events that would either bring justice to long-buried crimes or destroy anyone brave enough to speak the truth about the monarchy's darkest secrets. The palace erupted into chaos as Dr. Hartwell's evidence spread throughout the royal household like wildfire. Servants whispered in corners about historical conspiracies and criminal networks, while senior officials held emergency meetings behind closed doors. The careful facade of royal dignity began to crumble as decades of buried secrets fought their way to the surface. Charles burst into the security wing demanding Camilla's immediate release, his royal authority finally overriding the investigators' attempts to maintain control over the situation. His face was flushed with anger and embarrassment as he realized how badly his wife had been treated based on false accusations and manipulated evidence. The reunion in her detention cell was emotional and intense, filled with apologies and promises that justice would be served. Commander Harrison and Lady Margaret found themselves fighting for their professional survival as questions arose about their handling of the investigation. Their aggressive pursuit of Camilla, despite mounting evidence of her innocence, suggested either gross incompetence or deliberate obstruction of justice. Palace insiders began speculating about their possible connections to the original conspiracy that had stolen the crown jewels decades earlier. Sir Geoffrey Blackwood attempted damage control by announcing that new evidence had emerged that completely cleared Camilla of any wrongdoing, but his carefully worded statements only raised more questions about why the investigation had been conducted so poorly in the first place. Media outlets began pressing for information about the case, sensing a major scandal brewing within the royal household. Dr. Hartwell's continued examination of the hidden compartments revealed additional stolen artifacts that had been missing for decades. Priceless paintings, rare manuscripts, and historical relics worth millions of pounds had been secreted away throughout the palace by the criminal network Lord Pemberton had described in his confession. The scope of the thefts was staggering and represented one of the largest art crimes in British history. The discovery of Lord Pemberton's co-conspirators among current and former palace staff sent shockwaves through the royal establishment. Several trusted advisors and security personnel were placed under investigation as their connections to the historical thefts became apparent. The network had operated with impunity for decades, protected by their positions of authority and access to sensitive information. Lady Margaret's own involvement in the conspiracy became evident when Dr. Hartwell discovered communications between her and Lord Pemberton discussing the location of hidden artifacts and strategies for avoiding detection. Her aggressive investigation of Camilla had been a desperate attempt to maintain the cover-up and prevent exposure of her own criminal activities. The revelation that a senior palace official had been complicit in the thefts rocked the monarchy to its core. Commander Harrison's guilt became apparent when investigators found evidence that he had been systematically destroying security records and manipulating surveillance footage to protect the conspiracy. His appointment to head palace security had been orchestrated by the criminal network to ensure their activities remained hidden. His treatment of Camilla represented a final attempt to silence someone who had accidentally discovered their secrets. The psychological toll of her ordeal weighed heavily on Camilla as she struggled to process the magnitude of what she had uncovered. Her innocent search for reading glasses had exposed a criminal conspiracy that had operated for decades within the royal household. The stress of imprisonment, interrogation, and betrayal by trusted officials left her shaken and uncertain about whom she could trust. Charles worked tirelessly to support his wife's recovery while managing the crisis that threatened to engulf the monarchy. He ordered comprehensive security reviews and demanded the resignation of all officials connected to the conspiracy. His leadership during the crisis demonstrated his commitment to transparency and justice, even when it meant exposing embarrassing truths about the royal household. The media frenzy intensified as details of the conspiracy leaked to investigative journalists who had been tracking the story. Headlines screamed about royal corruption, stolen treasures, and cover-ups that reached the highest levels of palace administration. The monarchy faced its worst crisis in generations, as public trust eroded and demands for accountability grew louder. International attention focused on the British royal family, as the scandal expanded beyond missing jewels to encompass questions about institutional corruption and abuse of power. Foreign governments expressed concern about the security of their own royal artifacts and diplomatic gifts that had been entrusted to British custody over the years. Parliament announced formal inquiries into the thefts and the subsequent cover-up, with senior members of the royal household facing potential criminal charges. The investigation expanded to include financial audits of palace accounts and comprehensive reviews of security protocols that had failed to prevent or detect the criminal activities. Camilla's vindication came at an enormous cost to the institution she had married into and the people she had trusted. Her accidental discovery had triggered an avalanche of revelations that would reshape the monarchy and forever change how the royal household operated. The crown jewels she had found represented not just stolen property, but symbols of a corruption that had infected the very heart of British royalty. As the truth continued to emerge, Camilla realized that her ordeal had served a greater purpose than her own vindication. Her courage in the face of false accusations and her determination to see justice done had exposed crimes that might otherwise have remained hidden forever. The missing crown jewels had become instruments of justice rather than symbols of corruption. The palace would never be the same after the revelations triggered by Camilla's discovery. The criminal network that had operated with impunity for decades was finally exposed, and the stolen treasures they had hidden throughout the royal residence were being recovered and returned to their rightful place in the crown's collection. 6 months after her harrowing ordeal, Camilla stood in the restored queen's private study, now transformed into a memorial, honoring both the late queen's integrity and the courage required to expose institutional corruption. The hidden compartments had been sealed and marked with plaques explaining their historical significance. In uncovering one of the monarchy's darkest chapters, The criminal trials that followed the investigation resulted in multiple convictions and lengthy prison sentences for surviving members of the conspiracy. Lady Margaret Thornfield received 15 years for her role in the thefts and subsequent cover-up, while Commander Harrison was sentenced to 12 years for obstruction of justice and conspiracy to commit fraud. Their fall from grace served as a powerful reminder that no position of authority placed anyone above the law. Dr. Eleanor Hartwell received international recognition for her forensic work that had exposed the truth and vindicated Camilla. Her methodical investigation became a case study taught in universities around the world, demonstrating how scientific evidence could overcome political pressure and institutional bias. The recovered artifacts were valued at over £50 million, making it one of the largest art recovery operations in British history. Charles implemented comprehensive reforms throughout the royal household, establishing new oversight mechanisms and transparency protocols designed to prevent future corruption. Independent auditors now conducted regular reviews of royal collections and security procedures, while whistleblower protections encouraged staff to report suspicious activities without fear of retaliation. The media coverage of Camilla's vindication transformed her public image from suspected criminal to heroic truth-teller who had risked everything to expose institutional corruption. Her courage in the face of false accusations and her determination to see justice done inspired countless individuals facing similar battles against powerful institutions. Book publishers and documentary filmmakers competed to tell her story. Parliament's inquiry into the scandal resulted in new legislation governing the security and management of national treasures held in royal custody. The reforms included regular public inventories of significant artifacts, independent oversight of palace security operations, and stronger penalties for officials who abuse their positions of trust within royal institutions. The international implications of the scandal led to improved cooperation between countries in tracking stolen cultural artifacts and preventing art crimes. The British government's willingness to acknowledge and address institutional failures enhanced its credibility in international forums dealing with cultural heritage protection and recovery of stolen treasures. Camilla's relationship with Charles emerged stronger from their ordeal, their bond deepened by shared adversity and mutual support during the darkest moments of the crisis. His unwavering defense of her innocence and his commitment to pursuing justice regardless of political costs demonstrated the strength of their partnership and his fitness to serve as a future monarch. The recovered crown jewels were placed on public display for the first time in decades, allowing the British people to see treasures that had been hidden away by criminals for their own protection. The exhibition drew record crowds and generated significant revenue for charitable causes supported by the royal family, turning symbols of corruption into instruments of public good. Educational programs developed around the scandal helped students understand the importance of institutional accountability and the courage required to speak truth to power. Camilla's story became required reading in courses dealing with ethics, justice, and the rule of law, inspiring a new generation of individuals committed to fighting corruption wherever they encountered it. The psychological healing process for Camilla involved extensive therapy and support from trauma specialists who helped her process the experience of false imprisonment and betrayal by trusted institutions. Her recovery became a testament to human resilience and the power of truth to ultimately prevail over even the most sophisticated attempts at cover-up and deception. Legacy reforms implemented in response to the scandal included the establishment of an independent royal ombudsman position responsible for investigating complaints about palace administration and ensuring adherence to ethical standards. The position was filled by a respected former judge with broad powers to investigate and recommend corrective actions. Charles announced the creation of an annual award in Camilla's honor recognizing individuals who demonstrate exceptional courage in exposing institutional corruption or protecting cultural heritage. The award ceremony became a significant event in the royal calendar, highlighting the monarchy's commitment to transparency and accountability in all its operations. The palace library received a special collection documenting the entire scandal and its resolution, ensuring that future generations would understand both the crimes that had been committed and the reforms that had been implemented to prevent their recurrence. The collection served as a permanent reminder of the importance of vigilance in protecting democratic institutions from corruption. As Camilla reflected on her journey from accused criminal to celebrated hero, she understood that her accidental discovery had served a purpose far greater than recovering stolen treasures. Her ordeal had exposed systemic problems that might have continued for decades without intervention, and her courage had inspired reforms that would protect the monarchy and its treasures for generations to come. The missing crown jewels that had caused so much turmoil were returned to their rightful place in the Tower of London, where they continue to symbolize not just royal heritage, but the triumph of truth over deception. Camilla's name became forever associated with their recovery and with the courage required to stand up for justice even when facing the most powerful institutions in the land. Her story served as a powerful reminder that ordinary individuals could make extraordinary differences when they possessed the courage to do what was right regardless of personal cost. The palace walls that had once seemed to imprison her with false accusations now stood as monuments to the reforms her courage had made possible, ensuring that such injustices could never be repeated.